For a long time, we knew how to talk about inequality. We talked about money. We talked about education. We talked about networks, geography, family background, and access to opportunity. But in the intelligence economy, something new is forming right in front of us. A kind of inequality that doesn't always show up in someone's paycheck, but still shapes what they can do, what they can become, and how far they can go. It's the gap between people who can use intelligence systems, AI tools, and data to make better decisions faster, and people who can't. Between organizations that can think with machines and those still doing everything manually. Between nations building intelligence infrastructure and nations watching that future happen somewhere else. Today, we're exploring what we're calling the cognitive divide. What it is, how it works, what it looks like around the world, and what leaders can actually do about it. Welcome back to the B.I channel, where data meets decisions. I'm your host, Solen Hale, and joining me today is strategist and founder of the B.I channel, Nikiema, to unpack one of the most urgent social challenges of the next decade. Nikiema, welcome back.
Always a pleasure, Solen. And I agree with you on the urgency. The cognitive divide sounds abstract until you realize it's already shaping who gets ahead and who gets left behind.
Let's start with clarity, because people hear a phrase like cognitive divide, and they might think it's just another name for the digital divide. Internet access, devices, basic tech literacy. So let's define it cleanly. What is the cognitive divide?
The simplest way to put it is this. It's the gap between individuals, organizations, and nations who have access to intelligence systems and the ability to use them, and those who don't. And when I say intelligence systems, I don't just mean having a laptop and Wi-Fi. I mean tools that extend your thinking. AI co-pilots, analytics platforms, automation, simulation models, decision support systems. Anything that takes information, learns from it, and helps you make better choices faster. The divide shows up in decision-making power. It shows up in cognitive capability. It shows up in whether you can participate in the intelligence economy as a creator and strategist, or whether you're stuck as a passive user or excluded entirely.
So if the digital divide is about access to technology, the cognitive divide is about access to amplified intelligence.
Exactly. It's not just tools. It's capacity. Intelligence becomes the new currency of opportunity.
I want to slow down on that phrase, because it's huge. Intelligence is currency. Historically, money was currency. Degrees were currency. Connections were currency. Now we're watching something else take the lead, the ability to take complex information, use AI to interpret it, and turn it into smarter action. If you can do that, doors open. If you can't, you may not even know which doors exist.
Yes, and once you see it, you'll see it everywhere. In job performance, in school, in healthcare, in entrepreneurship, in government. The people with intelligence leverage get an invisible advantage.
All right, let's map the architecture of this divide, because it's not one single gap. It's layered. You often talk about 4 layers. Walk us through them.
Sure. Think of the cognitive divide like a stack. At the top, it's personal. Then it moves into companies and institutions, then nations, and finally generations.
Let's start at the individual level. What does the individual cognitive divide look like day to day?
At the individual level, it's very simple. Some people have AI co-pilots and intelligence tools that augment their work and learning, and others don't. One person has an assistant that can summarize a legal document, draft a proposal, analyze a spreadsheet, translate across languages, generate study guides, plan a project, and even coach them through decisions. Another person has none of that. Or maybe they have access but no fluency. They don't know what to ask, how to verify output, how to use the tool responsibly, or how to integrate it into real life.
And that second person might not be less capable in raw intelligence. They're just operating without leverage.
Exactly. The divide is not about who is smart. It's about who is augmented.
Okay, move us to layer 2, the organizational cognitive divide. What does it mean for a company to think with intelligence versus operate manually?
Organizations separate quickly now. Some treat data and AI like an operating system. They instrument their processes, collect information responsibly, build dashboards that guide decisions, use AI to reduce friction, and they constantly learn. Other organizations still run on memory, gut feel, and disconnected spreadsheets. They may have talented people, but the system doesn't support them. So decisions are slower, mistakes repeat, and they can't scale knowledge.
So the gap widens even if the manual organization hires great people.
Yes, because their people are doing unnecessary cognitive labor. They're spending energy chasing information, coordinating manually, and reinventing solutions. Meanwhile, intelligence-enabled firms are using that same energy for innovation.
Layer 3 is national, and this is where it gets geopolitical fast. What's the national cognitive divide?
Nations with intelligence infrastructure accelerate. Nations without it fall behind. And infrastructure here includes more than broadband. It includes compute capacity, research ecosystems, data governance, education and talent pipelines, startup ecosystems, and public sector ability to deploy intelligence tools. If a country has these ingredients, it becomes a magnet for capital and talent, and it can build competitive industries. If it doesn't, it becomes dependent on other nations' platforms and decisions.
So it's not only economic inequality between nations, it becomes an inequality of strategic autonomy.
That's right. If your nation can't produce or govern intelligence systems, you're forced to import them, and that means you're importing someone else's assumptions and incentives.
Layer 4 is generational, and you've said this is the most sensitive one. Why?
Because it cuts through families, workplaces, and communities. Younger generations are growing up with AI fluency. They will see AI not as a tool, but as an environment. Like the internet became an environment. Older generations may be brilliant and experienced, but if they aren't supported in adapting, they risk being excluded. Not because they can't learn, but because the pace of change can be punishing.
And that can create resentment, fear, and cultural backlash.
Yes. If people feel the economy is being rewritten in a language they don't speak, it's not just a skills problem. It becomes a social trust problem.
So we defined it and mapped the layers: individuals, organizations, nations, generations. Now let's talk impact. How does the cognitive divide reshape society and the economy?
I put it into 3 major shifts. First, opportunity becomes intelligence dependent. The people who have access to AI and understand how to use it will learn faster, apply more broadly, and compete at a different speed. Second, productivity gaps widen. Intelligence-augmented workers can produce higher quality output faster with fewer resources. That changes hiring, wages, and which roles are valued. And third, social mobility becomes intelligence-driven. Access to intelligence becomes a ladder. Not the only ladder, but increasingly a central one.
Let's make that concrete. When you say opportunity becomes intelligence-dependent, what's an example?
Take a small business owner. One owner uses AI to analyze customer feedback, forecast demand, optimize pricing, generate marketing content, and automate customer support. They can compete like a much bigger business. Another owner has equal hustle, equal ambition, but no access, no training, or no trust in the tool. They might spend hours doing what the first owner does in minutes. Over time, that difference compounds.
That compounding effect is key. It's like interest.
Exactly. Intelligence leverage compounds the way capital does.
And productivity gaps widening. That's not just an individual story. It becomes an industry story.
Yes. Entire sectors will move at different speeds. You'll see intelligence-rich industries that can attract talent and investment, while intelligence-poor industries struggle, even if they're essential.
And then social mobility. That sounds like the hardest one, because it touches fairness.
It does. If access to intelligence tools is uneven, then the ladder itself is uneven. People aren't competing on equal footing.
So inequality becomes cognitive, not only economic.
Yes. And it's subtle because it can look like meritocracy from a distance. The person with better output gets promoted. The company with better margins grows. The country with faster innovation leads. But underneath, there's an access layer that determines who had the ability to generate that output in the first place.
Let's zoom out globally. The cognitive divide doesn't look the same everywhere. You've described regional patterns, almost like different flavors of the divide. Walk us around the world a bit.
Yes, and this matters because policy and culture change the shape of the problem. In APAC, I often call it the accelerated divide. You have rapid adoption, massive scale, and regions moving extremely fast. That creates impressive breakthroughs, but it also creates fast movers and left behinds within the same country or even the same city.
So speed itself becomes a risk factor.
Exactly. If you don't build inclusion into acceleration, the gap forms quickly.
What about Europe?
Europe is often an ethical divide. There's strong attention to governance, privacy, and responsible AI. That can reduce harm and create trust, which is a big advantage. But access and deployment vary heavily by region and institution. So you can have very progressive standards, yet uneven practical access.
North America.
North America tends toward an innovation divide. Frontier AI development is concentrated in certain hubs, certain industries, certain companies. That creates big breakthroughs, but it can widen gaps between communities, between urban and rural areas, and between high-tech sectors and everyone else.
LATAM.
In Latin America, you often see an access divide. It's about infrastructure, affordability, and the ability of institutions to scale intelligence tools. There's incredible talent, but uneven access can blunt that talent's impact.
And Africa, a region people often talk about in terms of leapfrogging.
Yes, I call it the leapfrog divide. Mobile-first innovation can reduce certain gaps. People can access services and tools through phones in ways that bypass older infrastructure. But leapfrogging can also create new divides between those who can access and afford intelligence services and those who can't, especially when it comes to language coverage, local data availability, and digital trust.
So different regions have different constraints, but the pattern is consistent. Intelligence leverage concentrates advantage unless you deliberately broaden it.
That's the core message.
All right, let's go to the uncomfortable part. What happens if the cognitive divide keeps widening? If we do nothing, or if we treat this as just the way progress works?
We risk building intelligence-based class systems. There's the class that can access intelligence, train with it, and amplify decision-making. And there's the class that can't. And that separation shows up in opportunities, income, health outcomes, and influence. We also risk unequal access becoming normalized. People start to accept that some communities get high-quality guidance and services, while others get slower, lower-quality systems. Then there's political polarization. If people feel manipulated by algorithms they don't understand, or they feel locked out of a system they can't navigate, distrust grows. Economically, countries and regions can stagnate. If productivity improvements concentrate in small pockets, you don't get broad-based growth. You get islands of prosperity. And finally, social cohesion weakens. The divide becomes a fault line because people start living inside different realities of capability.
It's striking that the risk isn't only economic, it's cultural and political too.
Yes, the cognitive divide is about power. Power to decide. Power to compete. Power to be heard.
So let's shift into solutions. Leaders listening to this are going to ask a very practical question. What can a nation, a city, or even a large institution do to close the cognitive divide?
I think it starts with treating this like a national priority, not a niche technology issue. First, democratize access to AI tools. That can mean subsidies, public-private partnerships, and making sure small businesses, schools, and community organizations aren't priced out. Second, modernize education for intelligence fluency. Not just coding. We're talking about how to ask good questions, how to evaluate outputs, how to detect bias, how to use AI ethically, and how to collaborate with these systems.
So AI literacy in the broadest sense.
Exactly. Third, build public intelligence platforms. Governments already provide infrastructure. Roads, utilities, basic services. In the intelligence economy, public intelligence can become infrastructure too. Fourth, create ethical intelligence policies. People won't adopt systems they don't trust. So we need governance that protects rights while enabling innovation. And fifth, invest in community-level intelligence programs. Libraries, local training centers, workforce initiatives, and support for civic organizations. The goal is to make intelligence access feel normal, local, and usable.
I like that you included community level, because that's where people actually live. It's one thing to have a national AI strategy on paper. It's another when a worker can walk into a program and learn how to use tools to improve their career next month.
Yes, the divide is experienced locally, so solutions have to land locally.
And I'd add something you've hinted at throughout this conversation. Access without fluency still creates inequality.
Absolutely. Giving someone a tool without the skills and confidence to use it is like giving someone a library without teaching them to read. You need both.
Before we close, I want to ask for a final takeaway. If someone remembers one message from this episode, what should it be?
The cognitive divide is not a future problem. It's happening now. And it's not just about technology. It's about who gets intelligence leverage and who doesn't. If we want a stable and inclusive future, we have to treat access to intelligence the way we treated access to education in the industrial era, as a cornerstone of opportunity.
The cognitive divide may become one of the defining challenges of the intelligence economy. Nations and organizations that close the gap can build inclusive, resilient, future-ready societies. The ones that ignore it risk deepening inequality in ways that ripple across generations. Hale, thank you for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Solen. Thank you for creating space for this conversation.
And thank you for listening to the B.I channel, where data meets decisions. If this episode sparked questions for you, share it with someone who's thinking about the future of work, education, or public policy. This conversation is bigger than any one industry. Until next time.